if I bleed tonight, if I am sad tonight, I don't have a job to find. And if I work tonight, I'm so tired tonight, I'll fall asleep when I'm home.
Hi everybody and welcome to a brand new episode of the Power Slam podcast here on Inside the Ropes, episode number 7. I'm Kenny McIntosh, joined as always by the man behind Power Slam and the author of the ebook series Power Slam Through the Years and the interview series. You can get them, we'll plug them later on. It's Finn Martin. Hi Finn.
How are you doing, Kenny? Is it really 7 weeks already?
I know, right?
Hasn't that time flown by?
Time flies when you're having fun.
Exactly.
So there you go. But yeah, we finally met in person this week.
We did on Tuesday, yes, at the Goldberg Inside the Ropes event at the Comedy Store in Manchester. I enjoyed it immensely, Kenny. I hadn't been to anything like that you promoted. I'd been to similar events like this back in the 90s. But it's been a long time since I've been to anything like this, and I had a great time. I thought it was fascinating to see Goldberg interacting with the public. He had so much patience. He was so friendly. Spoke to everyone individually. Didn't rush anyone. You know, I mean, the guy was a proper gent.
Yeah, he's great. I mean, it's interesting because, you know, there's some guys you get, you know, like maybe a Matt Hardy or a Chris Jericho who remember every single, you know, pay-per-view detail or whatever, and Bill's just not that guy. So it's a little bit of a different show, but I think that people walked away happy from what they got from him and saw the emotion of him, you know, being happy having returned. So, but it was all worthwhile given that we got to meet.
Absolutely, yes, absolutely. And you're right, yeah, some wrestlers are different. Some have different ways of remembering things, and some have different views on certain things. And some wrestlers want to talk about, you know, like the industry in general, and other people just want to talk about themselves. But the thing with Goldberg was it was a very positive vibe that you got from him. There was no bleakness, there was no negativity. It just felt like a very uplifting event. That's what I really took from it, Kenny.
And I mean, that's great feedback for me. Also, I do just want to give a quick shout out to Alex, who we bumped into while we were talking, who was a big fan of Power Slam back in the day and listens to this podcast. So hi, Alex. Hello,
Alex. For yeah, great to meet you this week.
But yeah, so we're going to talk about various bits and pieces. But I do need to ask you a question, Finn, because you've been working in this industry, the wrestling industry, for over 20 years, and I feel like you maybe are the sort of person that can explain something to me when I don't quite understand what's going on.
Well, I'll try. I'm not sure if I can. There's lots of... one thing I've noticed over the years, Kenny, is that in wrestling, there are many unanswerable questions.
I feel like I'm going to add one to the list for you. Can you explain to me, because I've talked about this on the Raw Rundown podcast, what exactly did Impact buy when they bought Global Force Wrestling?
That's a good question. I guess they bought the rights to the name, and they bought the rights to the titles, which they are thankfully unifying with the Impact Wrestling titles at Slammiversary this Sunday. I mean, that's been a constant complaint of yours.
Is this the first time in history where a company have had an inter-promotional or war with belts that had never before appeared on television?
Well, quite possibly, yeah. Quite possibly. I mean, you're right. What have they bought, really? I think what they bought is they bought an end to some type of, you know, there's been some confusion. There's been like a muddying of the waters. You know, GFW has been this sort of, I guess in a way, almost like this nuisance, this thing that's sort of in the way. What is GFW? What is Global Force Wrestling? Why does it exist on this show? And at least after this weekend, we shouldn't hear about it anymore. So, I mean, that's one good thing that presumably will come from Slammiversary and also will come from Anthem's purchase of GFW this week, is that we just won't have to hear about it anymore. So that's got to be a good thing, Kenny. It's got to be.
I guess it has to be a good thing. You mentioned off air that you've actually been watching Impact and you've been enjoying it. So what's been going on, and what are you? Because obviously Slammiversary, is it their first pay-per-view of 2017? I think it is.
I believe it is, yeah. I think
Sunday.
Apart from the one night only series that they do, but the first proper live pay-per-view, yeah, I believe it's the first one of 2017. I mean, what I've been enjoying is they've been just, the basic structure is there. I mean, they've been achieving growth on the ratings front over the last few weeks. I mean, last week's episode drew 342,000 viewers. Which is, May 25th episode drew 305,000, June 1st drew 287,000, June 8th episode 318,000, June 15th 327,000, and then June 22nd 342,000. So that's steady growth there. Okay, they're not on the verge of challenging WWE for world dominance. I mean, and nothing... It doesn't really mean that much in the big picture, but it is slow, steady growth. And I feel like the basic structuring platform is there upon which Impact Wrestling can continue to build. I mean, one thing that they've done with the X Division that I like is that they've had the X Division title defended in the main event of Impact, I think twice in about the last 5 weeks. We had like an Ultimate X match, which Low-Key won. And then we had the Low-Key versus Sonjay Dutt match, in which Dutt finally won the X Division title. And they really painted the picture there that, Dutt had been with TNA Impact Wrestling on and off almost from the start, and that he'd never won the belt. And he was like, the storyline being that he's like the greatest wrestler in the X Division never to win the title. Easy story to tell, but one that people can believe in. And obviously with Impact being held in Mumbai, India, that didn't do Sonjay any harm at all. So there was a tremendous response when he beat Low-Key for the belt that night, as you might imagine. So I just feel like, there's probably still too much comedy on the show, with the Rockstar Spud and Swoggle storyline and the Jeremy Borash, Joseph Park versus Scott Steiner and Josh Matthews storyline. There's probably still too much comedy on there. But apart from that, I really feel like it's a real solid wrestling show that's not really insulting your intelligence, that's trying to achieve something. It's trying to, the storylines generally have a start, a middle and an end. And it's all about the matches. And also this Sunday as well, it's all about unifying the titles. So they're going to do away with those titles that really no one needs. So I think, Impact Wrestling should be praised for that. So yeah, I've been enjoying the show lately. I tape it every week on Spike TV, and yeah, I enjoy it.
There you go. So also, I mean, obviously it's been quite a big week with the revelation that Mauro Ranallo is officially returned to WWE. He's now the new lead commentator of NXT. Tom Phillips obviously does his thing on SmackDown, so they're kind of just, it's a clean break. Tom's over on SmackDown and Mauro's now in NXT. Were you shocked to hear that he had sort of negotiated to come back and they put this deal together to have him be the front man of the NXT commentary team? Not
really. I mean, he's been around a long time. I mean, he was the guy who famously provided commentary on Brock Lesnar's first ever MMA fight in June of 2007, it would have been, for K1 Heroes I think it was in Los Angeles. So he's been around a long time as Ranallo. I mean, he knows the way the game's played. He's worked for a lot of companies. And there was a lot of allegations made about certain things, as to why he had left or been asked to leave or whatever it was. There was a lot of rumours flying around about what the circumstances were behind his departure from the SmackDown commentary desk. I felt that, he really he didn't really talk about it at all, from what I understand. He didn't really say much about it at all, from what I understand. Kenny, are you aware of that? Are you aware of anything that he said publicly about his departure?
No, I think all he said is that his departure from SmackDown had nothing to do with rumored disputes. But I think it is smart to have him kind of far away from JBL and far away from that kind of old school jock ribbing, atmosphere that they have there in some regards, because clearly last time Ranallo kind of had a bit of a breakdown, and whether he is, people who have got mental health issues can take things that you mean as a joke far more seriously, and I think it's probably for the best to have him. I think he fits NXT more, actually, in terms of NXT as a brand. It's the cool thing, and I think he'll do well down there. I think it's a good thing for everybody that he's back. Yeah,
I absolutely agree. I mean, just getting back to the SmackDown thing, I mean, the fact that he didn't talk about it, that's what WWE likes. If something happens, they don't want you spilling your guts about it. Just keep stum, say nothing. And if you are seen as valuable, you're seen as professional, you're seen as usable in their framework, they will then be more inclined to bring you back. So to answer your original question, I wasn't that surprised, because I mean he's a red hot commentator. He's so good at his job. So to me, he was a guy that Vince or WWE or Triple H, whoever made the call, would want to use again, because he's very good at his job. And as you say, by putting him in a different environment away from JBL, who may or may not have been the reason that he left in the first place, I think everybody is a winner here. I mean, he was really good on NXT this week. I thought it was a very, very good show. It's really, the contrast, of course, is when you compare anything with Raw. And this is partly why I enjoy Impact Wrestling so much, is that it's a 2-hour show, so it doesn't really drag. And they've got enough stars and enough ideas and enough storylines to fill that 2-hour period without it overstaying its welcome. With NXT, with it just being 1 hour each week, it feels even more exciting. And you really look forward to each episode, because there's only a limited amount of time each week, and you don't see everyone each week, which is another reason for you to tune in, because you may only see Drew McIntyre once every 3 weeks instead of every week. So that's another good reason to tune in. I mean, this week's NXT was all action. We had the Velveteen Dream. He defeated Ho Ho Lun. I thought the Velveteen Dream looked amazing. I mean, I was so impressed with this guy. I mean, could this guy be the future of wrestling, Kenny? What do you think?
Well, the good thing that he's done is he's committing to the character, which is something that they like. So I don't necessarily think this will be his character in 5 years, but I think that, he's 21, he's in great shape. Obviously, people will know him better as Patrick Clark from NXT, Tough Enough in 2015. I think he's got a big upside, as Jim Ross would say. And I think he could be really good. So I think that for being 21, I think he's in a good spot. He's in the right place. I don't think there's a rush to really do too much with him, but I think he's a good guy to have on TV and kind of get him in people's minds a little bit for the next couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, the character, I do agree with you about the character. It seems like a second or third match character. I think that's going to prevent him from realising his true potential if he continues to play this character. But he's got so much personality. I mean, what an athlete. I mean, the guy is in terrific shape. He can move so well in the ring. The match didn't last that long, but it lasted long enough to me to see that this guy has a heck of a lot of talent. I mean, you're not going to compare him to Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, because that's unfair. But I looked at him and I thought this guy could be something very special. I mean, we were asked, I think it was in last week's podcast, who in the WWE system could become a major star? And I was like, that question was like flashing through my head when I was watching watching the Velveteen Dream. I thought this guy's really got something. So I mean that was really good. There was an Oney Lorcan versus Atami match. That was very realistic. Atami actually, his nose was busted right at the bell. This actually stemmed from a match a few weeks earlier where Atami appeared to turn heel on Logan. So Logan was there out for revenge, flung himself at Itami from the bell and hit him with this like big forearm. And I think it was actually when Itami's nose hit the rope that he busted his nose and he was bleeding quite heavily. The match was stopped. Itami then came back out, actually kind of like a tough guy babyface. So that was a bit weird. With this guy that supposedly turned heel, he's now getting a massive babyface ovation. And then Logan and Itami had a match. That was a really tough match. Really good match. And then we had Sanity came out. They interfered in the match. And that was a really good angle as well. Kazuya Ono was involved in that. And that set up a match between the Sanity guys and Ono and Itami. I think it's on next week's program. So that, that was a really good angle. That all really set things up.
And obviously they also set up a lot of hype for Bobby Roode defending the title against Roderick Strong next week, which was good.
Absolutely, they did do, yeah.
But it was all about the main event, right? It was all about Nikki Cross and Asuka, and I think Asuka's just one of these performers that she has so much charisma and she just feels like a star. She really, and then Nikki Cross, I don't know if there's ever been a woman who's come into NXT and so quickly developed such a strong character. I mean, Nikki's just fantastic as a character. And I saw her at Download when she was with Sanity, and she commits to the character, even if she's on the outside, managing part of Sanity. She's, and I thought they kind of tore the house down at Full Sail with their match. Yeah,
the first ever last woman standing match. Really enjoyed that, and that made it a clean sweep for the women, didn't it? With women headlining Raw, SmackDown, and NXT, which I don't think has ever happened before in the same week.
Yeah, no, it never has, which is a great thing, and I think all three of those shows, the matches felt like they belonged in the main event on those episodes. I don't think
absolutely agree.
It didn't feel forced. Sometimes you do something where you put something in there to just kind of say, "Look, we're giving the women a chance," but really, the segments don't merit it or the matches don't merit it. But I'm maybe them. What do you think about in terms of Asuka's undefeated streak? Do you want to see it last a long time, or do you? Is there someone you see who you go, I want her to lose the belt to this person? Where do you see Asuka's undefeated streak going?
I'm kind of having flashbacks to the Goldberg appearance there, where you were asking him about his undefeated streak. It's tough to say, really, isn't it? I mean, I didn't see the Asuka undefeated streak lasting this long, and at times I've thought, has it lasted this long because WWE doesn't know what to do with her on the main roster? That has occurred to me. What do you think to that, Kenny?
I think it's more Triple H doesn't want to let her go. I think Triple H, she's such a big star. Her leaving NXT for the women's division would almost be like, 2000 losing Steve Austin.
Yeah.
Like, she's that big a deal for the women's division, especially when a lot of the other women, like Nikki Cross and Ruby Riott and Ember Moon, they're all really, really good. But then you've got Billie Kay and Peyton Royce, and they're very, very early stages of having fully fledged characters. So I think Asuka's very much kind of queen of the castle, and I don't really want to. I'm going to be honest. I don't really want it to be Ember Moon that takes the belt from it. I don't think Ember Moon is connecting anywhere near enough for me to want her to be the one to take the belt from Asuka. So for me, I would rather that Asuka keep the belt until there's someone and a situation and an angle and a match where it will be worthy of that streak ending.
Yes, I agree. Absolutely agree. I mean, maybe Triple H, it's out of fear. For Triple H is thinking, I'm not letting her go. I'm not letting her go to the main roster until they've got like a killer wearing. We want it to be Nakamura levels for her. We want her to get the Nakamura introduction. We don't want her to come to be promoted to the main roster and end up like Ty Dillinger or American Alpha. That's the last thing he wants. So, I mean, perhaps that's a motivating factor as well. Let's keep her here. Let's keep the title on her. And then they can't bring her up prematurely or without a sufficiently compelling, introduction or storyline or feud or whatever to introduce her with.
We've also not talked a lot about the Mae Young Classic, which has been announced, obviously, and we've got JR and Lita on commentary. We've got wrestlers from all across the world who are going to be competing in it. How do you feel about the Mae Young Classic, and what do you think because the thing is, the Cruiserweight Classic, I think everybody loved last year. They really loved it. And 205 Live's kind of shat the bed a little bit. So what do you think the outcome is of the Mae Young Classic, and what do you think it should be or could be?
I think hopefully some of the talent will get signed, and some of them will be introduced on the main roster and used properly. I mean, it's all tricky to really comment on that, isn't it, really, Kenny? I mean, after Raw's Gauntlet match this week, in which Nia Jax was basically booked as the killer babyface, smashing through all these heels. Only she's actually the heel, and they were babyfaces. I mean, it was a destruction job. Especially on poor Bayley. I mean, she was out there and she looked like, I just found the whole thing scatterbrained in that she returned last week, Bayley, with her music and ran down and beat everybody up and looked like this, big heroine. And then on this week's Raw, she opened it against Jax in the Gauntlet match, and Bayley's there looking like, timid. A babyface should not be meek and mild and scared. A babyface should be strong and fearless and stout-hearted and courageous. I mean, I just didn't get it. I mean, the contradiction between the way she was presented last week and the way she was presented this week was just mystifying to me. And things like that really do concern me when it comes to the future of these characters and the future of character development, because they just can't seem to be able to do just basic things correctly at times. And she was just smashed by Jax. And like Emma, I mean, ever since Emma came back, it's just been a disaster for her. I mean, the only actual babyface who looked like she had anything about her, who you could actually believe in at the end of the match, of course, was Sasha Banks, who won. But the rest of the cast was just sort of fed to Nia Jax. So, the great fear you've got is if they do sign some women following this Mae Young tournament, how will they be treated on the main roster when characters that they've had under contract for years were treated like that this past Monday? That's my fear, Kenny.
So out of the whole time that you've covered, this is just kind of, we didn't plan this, but I thought, why not? The conversation's going that way. Can you talk a little bit about when you started covering WWF, which would have been in, 92? 92,
yeah, with Superstars Wrestling.
Talk a little bit about that first time within the time that you've covered it, that they tried the women's division again. So in 93, they bring in Alundra Blaze, they have a women's division for about 2 years, very loosely. Then it goes away, and they try it again in 98, 99.
Yeah.
It was only really in the early 2000s when they really, Trish and Lita, they really went full pelt with it. How do you think, or from what you know, how does Vince McMahon feel about women's wrestling? Has he felt in the past? And why do you think that there's been a lot of stop-start over the years at various points?
I mean, that's a tough question to answer. And I think a lot of it really depends on, he's very fickle. Everyone knows that. I mean, Wendy Richter was quite a big star around the time, she was linked with Cyndi Lauper when we had the Rock and Wrestling Connection in 84, 85. So Wendy Richter was quite a big star, not as big a star as some people think, but she was a pretty big star then. And then she, of course, was then fired, and the women's division, with Sherry Martel was part of that. And then she achieved far more success as a manager than she ever did as a wrestler in the WWF back in the 80s, early 90s. So he kind of lost interest there. As you say, we had Medusa or Alundra Blaze. She was then pushed. And I think it probably peaked in that actual period. It peaked during the Alundra Blaze versus Bull Nakano feud. I mean, Bull Nakano was a terrific opponent for Alundra. I mean, they had the match at the All Japan Women Big Egg Wrestling Universe show from the Tokyo Dome. That was where Nakano won the belt. But they had like a really good match on Raw. I think it was in August of '94. And generally they had really good matches because even though Bull Nakano was pretty close to the end of her career at that point, she was such a talented performer that she could have credible matches with Alundra. Once Nakano went, and then Bertha Faye, Ronda Singh, she was then brought in as Alundra's key opponent, and she was no Bull, so I mean she was no Bull Nakano, so it kind of really fell apart there. It fell apart in late '95. Then of course Alundra's contract expired, and then she turned up on Nitro, of course, and dropped the women's title belt in the bin. This was after her contract was not renewed before that happened, by the way. A lot of people try and liken that incident to what happened at the Survivor Series 2 years later. And I'm not having that at all. That to me is not an explanation for that. Anyway, that's getting off topic there. So Vince really lost interest in the women after he didn't renew Alundra's contract. Obviously, he lost interest because if he wanted to retain her, he would have extended a contract. And then it came back again during the Attitude Era. But that was a very different type of women's wrestling in the Attitude Era, wasn't it, Kenny?
It was. That you had Sable, who kind of, couldn't really wrestle that well. But then you had women like Jacqueline and Luna who would try and help. And it didn't really seem to get off the ground until Trish and Lita, really, I guess.
Yeah, Lita was a huge star. There's no doubt about that, and Trish was as well. Trish was, let's face it, she wasn't much of a wrestler at the beginning. It wasn't probably until about 2004, 2005 that she really started putting it together in the ring. I was never really a fan of Lita as a performer. I thought she could do some moves fairly well. But I think she was reckless, and a lot of the times when you saw her in the ring, you felt like she was completely out of control. But there's no doubt in my mind that she was a huge star as a personality, very fondly remembered. But to me, where we're at now with the women, none of those women in the past can hold a candle to the talent that are in WWE right now. Just no way. So to me, we really are in a golden age of women's wrestling. The fact that they headlined all 3 TV shows this week, and as you say, it didn't feel forced at all. It just felt natural. Tells you that Vince right now is totally on board with this idea. The thing is, the great thing about it now is it didn't even seem sort of strange that the women were in the main event spot in those 3 TV shows, and that just tells you the level of acceptance that it has right now, and that's just really all of course from recruiting female performers who can go and really putting the investment into training them so that they can do more than 2 or 3 minute matches. As good as Trish was, she was a good performer in the mid 2000s, but she was nowhere near the level of the talent that are out there today. She could do a match. She had a match worked out, and she did that well. Everybody always remembers the match at Unforgiven in Toronto when she retired. That was really well done. She had a match on Raw with Melina Perez, which was really good as well. She was a good performer, but she wasn't anywhere near as versatile as what we're seeing in WWE right now. No way. To me, she wouldn't have been able to do those long, complicated matches that the women today can do.
So do you think Vince is behind it now? Is that
absolutely? Absolutely, he is. Yeah,
he's now more open than he's ever been before to women's wrestling and what it can do.
Absolutely, yeah. I think some people will be signed from the Mae Young tournament. I think it's obviously an excellent opportunity for all the women who are going to be entered into it. I hope a lot of them get signed. I hope a lot of them get some, career stability. If you get that WWE contract, and even if you only have a short career there, it's a huge leg up on the independent circuit or internationally. You can charge more. You get more bookings, so it's really good for the talent. And the idea, of course, is that eventually, perhaps WWE will do a women's show on the network, like a 205 Live type show just for the women. Perhaps they'll take so many female talent on that they'll be able to do a show, and they'll be able to make a success of that. I mean, I remember when Vince Russo was still on the head of the writing team in WWF, there was talk for a while, because Sable and some of the female characters were so over, that they were going to do an all-women show back then. It never happened, and that was actually for the best, because the women back then were used far more effective, used in short segments, because a lot of it was smoke and mirrors. Whereas I think the talent that are around now could do a 1 hour show and do it very well, with the right creative support, of course.
And I guess that leads us into the main event of. I actually want to kind of not disagree with you. There's maybe a little bit of a disagreement. I think you were talking a little bit about how Bayley was presented on Monday. Yeah. And I don't really have a problem with it, and I think that's because I think the character of Bayley needs to be crushed and sort of be rebuilt, because I just think that she's not connecting at all. I think part of that's got to do with the fact that I think she was in NXT 6 months too long. If you go back and watch the last 6 months of an NXT run, she wasn't really doing much. And I think Bayley is a performer who is hurt by being a weekly main roster character. I don't think she's a strong enough character for that. So I kind of like the idea of kind of, blocking her down a little bit. But what I really liked about the main event on Monday was I really liked how Sasha Banks and Nia Jax really came across like stars.
Yes.
And Nia Jax is my kind of performer. Now, some people will say she's too green. I don't really care, because I like the look that she has. I like her intensity when she's in the ring and competing. And I thought that her kind of mowing through all the women, and then Sasha sort of, valiantly taking her out at the end like she was a video game boss, just really worked for me.
Well, the problem I have with it is that Jax was basically in a babyface role and she's a heel. That was the fundamental problem I had with it. That's
a problematic presentation.
So Banks was there as the babyface coming in against the exhausted heel. Mm-hmm. So, and that sort of doesn't make sense psychologically when you think about it. I would have much preferred if they just had a Sasha Banks versus Nia Jax match, and that the other women on there were not smashed like that. They were just obliterated. I don't see what they're going to do with Emma. Dana Brooke.
The thing with Emma is, Emma has been given a fair few chances. She's had a lot of injuries. They put that Emelina thing behind her for the better part of 9 months, and from what I've been told, and from what I've heard, she just couldn't get it together. They wanted her to play a character a certain way. She couldn't do it, and think about it this way: if WWE felt that it was so bad they couldn't put it on Raw, think of some of the stuff they have put on Raw.
Yes,
like how bad must she have been at this role? And I think that when you do something like that, and I get this maybe not the fairest thing in the world, but when you've got a queue of women who are like willing to do whatever's asked of them and willing to be team players, and then you've got a woman who's just not performing at the level you want her to, I get why you're not going to put a lot of eggs in her basket.
Yeah.
The one that I would like to see more from is Mickie James, because I think that she's now been positioned in that nostalgia role. Whereas I think she can still go, and I think that she has enough of a name that she could be a player. But then, maybe if Sasha, is able to get the championship, maybe Mickie could be a heel opponent for her at some point. I think that could be good.
Yeah, possibly. But she only came in as a heel, didn't she, with Alexa Bliss
as La Luchadora?
Yeah, she's since done the turn. So I think, I'm not sure if you could turn her again.
Yeah, well, I guess we'll see. But what did you think of the women's Money in the Bank round 2 and the way it all played out on Tuesday night? How did it work and pan out for you?
I enjoyed the match. I didn't feel that Carmella really owned it like I hoped she would. I felt like the James Ellsworth run-in was an unnecessary distraction. And I felt it really rendered Daniel Bryan's authority impotent, that he'd had Ellsworth thrown out of the building earlier in the show. I really felt like they spent too long on that angle as well. With Ellsworth there fighting and escaping from the security guards. It's like, just get rid of him, just get rid of this guy. And then he comes back and runs in on the match, and then there's no security out there. There's no Daniel Bryan out there to make any sort of decision on that. I thought that was really limp, feeble. That's what I thought that was, Kenny, feeble. And to me, it was a good match. I'm in a sense, I'm glad that Carmella won, because if they're going to stick to the guns on that one, then she had to win again. But I mean, I said this in our last podcast. If this was the outcome all along, why didn't they just make it sort of conclusive in the first place? That's would be my argument against it. I mean, I think they were expecting some sort of, huge rating. And SmackDown did go up slightly this week. I think it really go up that much. It was like 2.6 million viewers. So it wasn't really a huge bonanza in terms of the ratings. I mean, I guess maybe if they hadn't presented the Money in Bank ladder match, the number would have been way down. But to me, my problem with it was that it should have really been a stronger performance from Carmella. Because of the controversy and the fact that she didn't grab the case herself at Money in the Bank, I felt that she really needed a stronger performance and to be framed as a more dominant performer than she was in that match. But I mean, overall, I'm glad that the controversy has been settled. We all know where we are right now, Kenny, and that's the main thing.
Yeah, exactly. I think that the first Money in the Bank match was probably better in terms of how it was, like, to the point that it got to. But at the same time, I think you can't do it all the time. So I'm not saying you should, but I think that the whole angle and now the payoff was a success for me anyway. Watching it, because for me before that pay-per-view, I couldn't really have given two shits about Carmella as a character. Now I'm kind of invested in her, and I do think what you're saying is right. She could have put in a stronger performance, and I would have liked to have seen a little bit more conviction from her on that. But at the same time, I think that she did well enough that I now care about the character, and I'm happy that even though the Ellsworth thing happened, which I think some people will like, some people won't. I'm glad that Ellsworth was. Because what they did there was they gave you part of the payoff of Becky Lynch getting her own back on Ellsworth.
Yes. And
then you got a little bit of intensity from Carmella as she's smacking Becky with the chair, which I liked. So I thought that overall, I liked the angle. If it was a good 2-week story, it got some interest. It made somebody a bigger star than they were before going into it. So for me, it was a success.
I mean, the thing is, it's up to Carmella right now, isn't it, to really turn it up and to prove that she deserves this spot.
She's been given all the tools here. They've given her everything here to go, right, okay, we believe in you as a character, we believe in you as a performer, we've given you this controversy, we're putting the heat on you for it, now it's up to you, So
I mean, maybe we'll look back on this and say, you know what, they did the right thing by not making her look super dominant in that match. Because this is the start, this is what you hope for every WWE storyline. Oh, it's the start of a journey. It's going to be huge. It'll all make sense in the end. Oh, you'll see. And you really hope that will be the case with Carmella and the briefcase, in that she really will become a better performer and somebody that you can really believe in. I think she's come a long way over the last year. I think she's done well. And I think, or at least I hope, she's got the ability to do that. I think she realises that this is huge for her. I don't think she's taking this for granted, and I think she's got something to prove to the public. So I'm really hoping that will be the outcome here. Just one other comment about SmackDown. The other rematch from Money in the Bank didn't end well at all for Lana. Naomi pinned her in 41 seconds. Didn't see that coming. I mean, I saw the result coming, but didn't think it would be quite that swift. What did you make of it, Kenny?
I mean, I'm probably the wrong guy to ask because I don't think Lana should be wrestling. So I was very happy that it ended in 40 seconds. But yeah, I just don't think that she's got what it takes at the moment to be like. I think you can have a character like Lana, 100%, but like. But the problem is, now you've got Maria Kanellis, who's a very strong character, as the sort of non-wrestling female on that show. And Lana would have to be another one. Maybe it's too similar. But I've not seen anything yet where I kind of go. I think the thing with SmackDown was like when Carmella and Alexa were drafted to SmackDown, I don't think they were quite where they needed to be. But I think they've both improved and they deserve credit for it. But I just don't think Lana is. I mean, do you think Lana could hang in a sort of 10-minute wrestling match on a weekly basis?
No, definitely not. I mean, she was out there with Naomi for too long at Money in the Bank. I thought that match just lasted a little bit too long. I thought she did well at times, but the match really lasted too long and really betrayed her inexperience. It became very obvious. But I think she's somebody that could become a better performer. I mean, to me, that was a declaration from WWE that Lana, basically, you're either A, we're not going to use you as a wrestler anymore, or B, you are nowhere near ready for this spot. So that was, we'll see what happens next week. But that was the outcome was very, I think it would really drew a line under her as somebody that we can take seriously if they're going to continue using her as a wrestler. I think it's more likely that they'll just put her back with Rusev if he ever returns to television, and maybe she'll continue her training and maybe she'll get another shot maybe in 6 months' time.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know where really you go from here. I don't know where you. I don't really get the. And listen, I'm open to it because I'm not shitting on it because I don't know what they're doing. But I at the moment I'm kind of like I wonder why she was brought up to lose these matches. Maybe that's going to be part of a story, but I'm curious as to why. Yeah,
it's. I mean, yeah, we'll just have to wait and see. It doesn't really seem to make a whole lot of sense, apart from at least you can say if you're in the same boat as you, Kenny, where you think Lana shouldn't be used as a wrestler, then you probably will share your sentiments, echo your sentiments, and yes, thank God that's over, and now she can go back to doing whatever it is that she's going to do, but she shouldn't be challenging for the title. I mean, it did seem a strange thing. Pardon me?
Put her back with Rusev. That was great.
Yeah, put her back with Rusev. Yeah, that's a great spot for her. I mean, to me, it was very strange that she was even given a title match in the first place. It was such a contrived storyline. It's like, why has she been given a title match? And then why was she given another title match? It was all very strange. So it was almost like, yeah, we do this 41-second match just to let people know to, broadcast the message that this woman is out of her depth and cannot be taken seriously in this position and will not ask for a title match again. I think maybe that's it. So we'll see what happens next.
I do want to ask you, as we kind of wind down on the stuff that we're talking about, this week marked 6 years since the pipe bomb from CM Punk back in 2011, and Paul Heyman had made a point of sending a tweet out about it. What do you remember about that? What do you remember? Did you know at the time when you were writing Power Slam that he was leaving before that promo happened? I mean,
yeah.
So you knew he was leaving. Talk me through, sticking on Raw, and he does that promo. What were your thoughts?
I mean, it was well known in wrestling that he was going. He'd had enough. His contract was coming up for renewal. I've got to say at the top of my head, I don't know when it was going to end. I think, was it the end of that summer? I think it was.
No, it was actually going to be, they had to sign an extension to get him to do Money in the Bank. So it was literally going to run out maybe a week or two after he cuts this pipe bomb promo.
That is correct, yeah. Yeah, that's right. He, because that was factored into the storyline, wasn't it? That he was going to leave with the title.
Yeah.
And before they gave him the title at Money in the Bank, he'd already signed his contract extension, because as if WWE was going to put itself in that position, giving its title to a guy that wasn't under contract. It was an exciting time, and it felt like something was changing. For me, as a magazine editor and a magazine publisher, it was a huge boon. I mean, magazine sales for issue 205, it would have been, that featured the story on the whole Punk pipe bomb and the sort of worked shoot promos he was doing with Vince on TV, which were just incredible, just tremendous TV. Kind of remind me of the famous Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels feud from mid-97, where you never quite knew what they were going to say and what was and what wasn't real. So, and that's really, as wrestling fans, that's what we want. We want to watch it and suspend our disbelief. So it's terrific when we actually get that. It's sort of like a wrestling fan's dream come true. I mean, I've always favoured the wrestlers who can make it look real within the parameters of pro wrestling, of course. I was never been a fan of, wrestlers whose work you could see through. I mean, I just got no time for those type of performers. So when you're actually seeing an extension of that on promos where guys are saying the things that Punk and Vince were saying, I mean, it was just fabulous. I remember doing a huge feature in Power Slam on it and transcribing all the best material, all the best lines, because I just thought this has just got to be written down. It's got to be written down. This deserves to be, kept for future generations. And I thought it was terrific. And it was really sad that WWE blew it so quickly. I mean, he was only off TV for, 8 days? He won the belt at Money in the Bank, then said that he was leaving, wasn't on Raw the next night, but was on Raw the week after. And at that point, it just fell apart. It just went to pieces. The shed collapsed. But up until then, I thought it was marvelous. What did you think of it, Kenny?
Oh, I loved it. It was one of those times where, as a wrestling fan, you don't know where the truth ends and the fiction begins. And that when you can do that, it's I don't know if I've been more excited or on the edge of my seat for a match than Cena and Punk at Money in the Bank. It was just, I don't know if they'll ever be able to capture that level of sort of realism again.
I think they could do. I think they absolutely could do. Enough time has elapsed where they could do it again. Without doubt, they could do it again. They just need a character who could go out there and really do it and really bring it. And you'll need a really strong management figure. I guess Triple H maybe. But the problem with Triple H, when he got involved in the CM Punk angle, that was, Kevin Nash as well kind of ruined it. The stuff with Triple H didn't work at all. I mean, as soon as they did the angle where Vince was supposedly relieved of his duties, I felt it really lost a lot of its realism. And CM Punk and Vince had tremendous chemistry together. And they were willing to work with each other and make each other look good. And as soon as you put Nash in there and Triple H in there, instead of the guys really trying to complement each other, it kind of almost felt like they really were going into business for themselves and trying to shut each other down, which, was detrimental to the entertainment value of the segments. So to me, it was golden when CM Punk and Vince were going at it. And for me, as I said, as an editor, a magazine publisher, it was fabulous because people were really captured the imagination of the public. Kenny, I know this because my magazine sales went up considerably for issue 205, which was the issue that covered Money in the Bank and the whole storyline. So, I really loved it for that reason as well.
So unless you have anything else you want to talk about, I have one last topic that I wanted to get your thoughts on. I was going to get your thought on the balls from Raw, but before we go on to that, is there anything else you want to bring up before we go to that? I would
say, on the subject of CM Punk, he will be at the Eternal Con convention this Saturday and Sunday at the Nassau Coliseum in Uniondale, New York. He's actually named in the publicity as a WWE and UFC star, and they're using a wrestling photo to promote his appearance. So yeah, I thought that was quite wow. CM Punk's back. He's doing a convention. It has occurred to me, Kenny, that he may be asked quite a few times this weekend. He may be asked this question. So, when are you returning to WWE?
Well, here's a question. I always try and like add this in before you give an answer. But you've worked in wrestling for over 20 years. Your opinion means a lot, Finn. People look up to you. So, with that being said, do you think CM Punk will, at some point before the end of his athletic career, return to WWE to have one more match?
What is he now? Is he 30?
38?
38, yeah. I think he's 39 in October. Is that right? He's either 38. I think he might be 39 this year. It's about that age. So he's got a good, 6-7 years where he could still put a match together, maybe even longer. So, I mean, the answer has to be yes, doesn't it? Because there's so many years in which a deal can be put together. There's so many years, in which feelings can thaw and people can forgive each other. I mean, I always say, Kenny, that if Vince can put a deal together with Bruno Sammartino after all those years of bile, which was much, much worse, I think, than the CM Punk WWE fallout, although the CM Punk WWE fallout was pretty bad. But I think the Bruno Sammartino, Vince McMahon fallout was worse. If Bruno can come back in 2013, he returned for the Hall of Fame ceremony. I think it was after something like 26 years or something like that on the outside.
It was.
If Vince can put a deal together with the Ultimate Warrior, or Triple H can put the deal together with the Ultimate Warrior after, what was it? He went in 96, I think it was, wasn't it? Yeah, 96 was the final bust-up. And he returned in 2014. So what's that? That's 18 years. If deals can be put together with those two guys, then I think a deal can be put together between CM Punk and WWE. So I think it will happen. I think it will be a few more years before it does happen. But I think once Punk's got the whole MMA thing out of his system, which he might have already done for all we know. Once he's got that out of his system, and the money starts going down and the opportunities, he's not, I mean, I know he did very well financially at WWE, and I don't think he was a lavish spender. So I think he's probably got enough money where he can live happily for the rest of his life. But still, if a 7-figure offer comes your way, and you think, well, why not? Why not do this? Maybe it'll be like a Goldberg thing where he'll have a son or a daughter who's never seen him wrestle, who he may want to wrestle for. I mean, that's a nice little Goldberg tie in there, Kenny.
Yeah, I like it. And if you're in London, you want to come see Goldberg on Sunday inside ropes.co.uk for tickets, why not just go the whole hog?
Well, exactly. But I think that is a valid point there, because that was, and that's not something Goldberg made up. That was a huge thing for him, wasn't it? Performing for his son.
The only thing I think that's going to be difficult is that Triple H seems to be the guy that mends defenses. But actually, in this case, it's the opposite way around, because Punk actually likes Vince, doesn't like Hunter. So it's going to be I almost feel that this might need to be, the last time where Vince really has to put the effort in himself to get Punk to come back. I hope he does. I really do hope he does.
I mean, maybe it'll be a situation where maybe Vince will suffer some sort of, Vince will suffer some sort of health problem or something like that, and then CM Punk will get in touch and they'll put it together that way. I mean, there's talk we're hearing that Hogan may be coming back after nearly 2 years in the wilderness. I've got to say that I can see that happening, because enough time has passed now where I don't think people will really bring up the reasons that his contract was terminated in the first place. I think that's sort of past now. So I could see Hogan returning. I think, the Punk thing, I think it will happen. It was January of 2014 that he quit, right after Royal Rumble, wasn't it? The night after Royal Rumble. Yep. So we're talking, we're coming up 3.5 years. But I think the deal can be put together. And my prediction is that he will come back at some point. But it may not be for another year or a couple of years. I'm saying that now, Kenny, in case it doesn't happen. And then I could just keep delaying it and postponing it, and I won't look like my prediction's incorrect.
Yeah, and then once CM Punk is 78 years old, he can come back to go in the Hall of Fame, and when you're on your deathbed at 97, you can say, I was right.
Look, I was right all along. You people doubting me.
So the
what
last...
do you think, Kenny? Would you like to see him back for that big match and that big program?
Oh, I'd love to see him back. But do you know what I think would be the best way to bring him back? I think he should be a heel. Because I think the best story you can tell... I mean, obviously, initially when he comes back, he's a babyface, of course. Yeah. But, like, I love the irony of he left because of the part-timers, and now he's become one.
Yeah.
Now he's doing what people did to him. And there's a really nice story there, and if you had someone like a Sami Zayn or somebody who he could bounce off of, I think it could be just dynamite. So, some people say, well, CM Punk seems like a bit of an arsehole. I could not care whether he is a nice guy or not. And I'm not saying he's not a nice guy. But I'm just saying, can you imagine the idea, like, oh, I don't want to see him back. He's not a nice man. I mean, if you knew some of the stuff that some of your people you like in wrestling have probably done, you may stop watching every single piece of wrestling you ever have watched.
Exactly.
I think as a performer, though, I think he was incredible. I think I much prefer him on the mic than in the ring, but that's just me. Yeah. But I think he's captivating. Last thing, Finn, I've talked about it already. I thought it was absolutely fucking dreadful, if you ask me. But LaVar Ball and his fucking children on Monday Night Raw, coming out on Miz TV. Any thoughts whatsoever to close us out as we talk about Mr. Ball and his big baller brand and his big baller children and all that goodness that we got to experience on Monday night?
I mean, I thought it was fantastically awful. Just dreadful. I mean, why did it exist? I mean, is this going to become like another Rocket League, or another tout? I mean, have they secretly bought into the Big Baller brand? Is that what that's all about? I mean, why were they even there? I mean, they're there with the mannequins and the T-shirts. It was just so cheesy. And is it LaVar? That was the father?
Yep, LaVar's the father.
I know nothing about basketball, right? I have no interest in basketball. I'd never heard of any of these people, right? And I'm sure in their world, the big stars and everything, and that's great. But I didn't really like the idea of them invading WWE, my form of entertainment. I was like, well, why are you here? Why are you interrupting my preferred form of programming, and what exactly are you going to bring to it? And I have no idea what. Even if the segment had been a good segment, what would it have achieved? I have no idea what the purpose of it all was. I mean, I wrote on Facebook that when it ended, it is my opinion that segment would be more likely to deter people from buying Big Baller brand products than to encourage them to buy Big Baller brand products. So I don't even see what they got out of it, apart from like a load of bad publicity. I mean, it was like LaVar was like talking over the Miz. When Dean Ambrose came out, he was talking over him. I mean, it was very noticeable to me that Ambrose's music played at the end of the segment seemed to play prematurely, as if that was Vince's way of saying, just kill this segment, just wind it up, just get it over with. It just felt like, I have no idea why this even existed. I have no idea why this segment was booked. And, I think it's...
I think the idea, the idea that seems to be prevalent was that, LaVar's son has just been a first ballot draft or whatever for the LA Lakers. So I don't even necessarily blame them for trying something to do with that. Like, I get it. It's not for me. I'm the guy that, when they show the NASCAR people, I want to fall asleep, But, like, I get that they tried it. I just think that the guy could have been in the front row. I just don't understand why they, kowtowed to this old moron.
Yeah.
Who, like you said, they've got mannequins and his T-shirts, and he's just... The thing that really riled me up about it was that he's standing there jaw-jacking with The Miz. The Miz is having to act scared of him, and his kids are just laughing.
Yeah.
I just thought, why are we doing, like, I don't understand, like, WWE have, like, and I don't know why. They have, they have this inferiority complex about, like, what, love us, and it's like, you are loved by millions of fucking people. You don't need to be having this old crony man who, by all accounts of people that I know who he is, he's a very annoying, loud commentator of basketball. I just thought he was bad, and I really wish that this had been in like another era where he'd got backstage and somebody like Jim Cornette had just screamed at him for being such a waste of space in that segment. It was so bad. It was so awful.
It was. I mean, you're right. Wrestling just demeans itself. I mean, it does this all the time. And you're right, it's got this inferiority complex. It's like some type of major self-esteem issues. It's almost at times like self-loathing. It's like, oh yeah, let's put this on the show so that all these websites who don't normally cover pro wrestling will cover pro wrestling. But then what did they do? They just mock it anyway. I mean, I understand the importance of mainstream publicity. This is what the World Wrestling Federation was built on, essentially in 84, 85, when it became truly national and mainstream. Of course, you need that mainstream media acceptance, but there's ways of doing it to get it where your brand or your promotion, your company is complemented by whatever you're doing to some level, and your talent are. I mean, The Miz. I mean, how was he enhanced by this segment? He just looked a fool. I mean, he was not in any way flattered by what happened. And it was kind of sad because it's in Los Angeles, which is his adopted hometown. And he just looked miffed. He looked unhappy to be participating in that. You could just see it on his face. He's like, wow, this segment's really bombing. We're just dying out here. And then Ambrose came out, and that was all very awkward, and it's very noticeable in wrestling. So I remember someone pointing this out to me many years ago, that it's hilarious that you've got these characters in wrestling who apparently detest each other, but they'll have a conversation and they won't ever talk over each other. They'll very politely wait for the other person to finish before they then speak. And if you think about it, it's kind of ridiculous. But that's also what happens in all action movies between the hero and the villain, because you've got to get your dialogue in, you've got to get your points across so that you tell your story. So when you actually watch a segment where one of the characters is talking over other people, and that person, you're thinking to yourself, why is this person even in the ring anyway? What purpose is he serving here? How is he adding to my enjoyment of this show? He's not, he's just subtracting from it massively. If he's then talking over the talent, you're thinking, will you shut up? Will you just leave now?
Yep, I'm with you. Well, listen, last thing I want to ask you very quickly. Given the LaVar Ball segment, I mean, the more I say his name, it gets even more ridiculous. LaVar Ball. Awful. Anyway, what do you think? What comes to mind immediately as the worst wrestling segment of all time? Or, it doesn't have to necessarily be the worst, but when I'm saying the worst wrestling segment of all time, what's coming into your head?
I'm not really sure. I mean, it's a difficult question for me to answer. I mean, there was a lot of really terrible stuff in TNA during Vince Russo's reign of terror. What
were the worst things that he did in TNA then? For people who, because a lot of people maybe weren't watching it, what are maybe a couple of things that he did that were so bad?
He had, there was a match between Abyss and Sting, where they had a coffin that was lowered that was raised to the ceiling. That was really terrible. I mean, to be honest with you, I try not to really think about the terrible segments, Kenny, because they kind of spoil your enjoyment of the business. And I feel like I've written about them endlessly, and it's hard really for me to sort of mention something that was so, I mean, I suppose The Undertaker's, when he was doing stuff after WrestleMania 15 with kidnapping Stephanie McMahon, and he was the corporate ministry. I remember thinking that was really terrible at the time. And I remember they sacrificed, was it Midian? They supposedly sacrificed him. That was just awful.
And they stole Mabel away.
That's right. That was just, I mean, yeah, that stuff like that was just really, I mean, Actually, it's all coming back to me now, Kenny. Oh, I'd buried all that. All these stories had just been buried away. I didn't have to disturb them, but now, you've unearthed them all. Well, obviously, the Mae Young hand segment. If you type in Mae Young in Google, Mae Young, the next word that appears is hand.
I'm doing it right now to see if you're right. You're right. Mae Young hand and Mae Young Classic.
I mean, the Miss Royal Rumble segment at Royal Rumble 2000, when Mae Young catched it?
Yep.
I believe she was actually wearing like a prosthesis, that she wasn't actually naked, but that was just staggeringly bad. The whole Mark Henry sex addiction storyline, that was just dreadful. The Dog Kennel from Hell match with Big Boss Man and Al Snow. Oh, it's all coming back now, Kenny. What about the famous Big Boss Man and Big Show's father's funeral? Remember that one?
I do. There's also Katie Vick.
Katie Vick, of course, was just... I'd actually managed to forget about that. I'd managed to just erase that from memory. Hot lesbian action was really just... Did
you ever think that, like, hot lesbian action ends with Rikishi?
That's it, Rikishi and Drag and Stephanie McMahon. No, I didn't think that was going to happen. I just thought that was a really sleazy segment that was just done for no reason at all other than desperation for ratings. And that was a very tough time for WWE as they were then, 2002. I felt like they really lost the way and they didn't know what they were supposed to be anymore. And they were doing a lot of things that really were upsetting a lot of people. I remember the Billy and Chuck thing. I mean, it was praised by the mainstream media. I always remember that segment where they were going to have, was it going to be a commitment ceremony? I can't remember the exact way it was phrased. And WWE was praised by a lot of mainstream media because if you go back to the 80s and even into the 90s, wrestling was so homophobic, or going back to the 70s, and I'm sure it was worse in the 60s, but certainly in the 80s, it was such a homophobic business. All these terrible stereotypes, all these awful messages it was sending out. So they were doing the Billy and Chuck thing in 2002, and they were really praised by mainstream media for not doing, for actually presenting this in a very sort of sensitive and, the word you would use, I suppose, is a grown-up way, not a juvenile, puerile way, which pro wrestling generally presented that section of society. And then they did the thing where Billy and Chuck said, well, we're not actually gay. And I remember people in the audience applauded that moment, and my heart just sank. And I just thought, oh, that's really such a shame. Such a shame that wrestling fans are reacting like that. And I just thought that was a really sad moment for pro wrestling because they were really doing something atypical and really trying to go against, years of really eliminating this awful stigma of wrestling appealing to the worst type of stereotypes. And then they just reverted to default settings. I thought that was a really sad moment as well. But I'm sure we could be here all day talking about awful segments. I think I'll probably
mention tons of wrestle crap out there.
Oh, I mean, there is so much, absolutely so much of it out there. I mean, there are just some of the ones not off the top of my head because you had to unearth them there, Kenny. which are your least favourite segments of all time?
Katie Vick is definitely up there. That's one of them. Jinder becoming WWE champion. That's another one. Awful. I live in a world where Roddy Piper was never WWE champion, but Jinder Mahal was. I don't feel comfortable living in that world.
Ted DiBiase never was.
No, don't keep naming the good ones, Finn. Don't name all the good ones. Oh God. Anyway, what else has been really terrible? The TNA Reverse Battle Royal is one of the worst things I've ever seen. WCW had a ton of bad stuff in the late 90s. I remember there was one episode of Nitro where Goldberg was arrested for sexual assault on Elizabeth, which he'd apparently committed, even though he hadn't. And They said he was at the police station, and could he make it back to the arena on time? Could he get back from the police station on time? And
that actually could have been the January 4th, 1999 episode.
I think it is. And that could have been a great angle had they not panned out at one point and shown the police station across the road.
Fantastic.
Which you know, took us out of the moment a wee bit. There's the plethora of things that, you know, Vince Russo did in the end of 1999 with, you know, all the stuff with the Mexicans and piñatas and Oklahoma, and you had Judy Bagwell on a forklift, but she was supposed to be on a pole, but they realised they couldn't get her on a pole because she was a human. So I also loved that Abyss had a weapon called Janice, who at one point seemed to murder Rob Van Dam, and then the next week he was just on TV unscathed.
Well, actually, I think a little bit of time did elapse, but the point is still right, because he didn't come back with any puncture wounds or anything. It was, that was really, really awful. I mean, wasn't the thing that was like an inside joke, was it? Because Janice was Dixie's mother. Yeah. And then at one point, Abyss, this was another staggeringly awful thing that TNA did. At one point, Abyss had a branding iron where he was actually branding people, and the branding iron was called Bob, which was Dixie's dad.
You can't even make it up. You cannot make it up. Well, let us know on Twitter what your favourite awful wrestling moments are. And you know, maybe 1 week just for Finn, we will dedicate an entire hour to the Ministry of Darkness and the Corporate Ministry, Finn's favourite wrestling factions.
Oh.
I love the idea though that, like, I need this faction, you know, that's going to take over the WWF. Who am I going to get? Phineas Godwin and Mabel. It's the least threatening army I've ever seen in my life.
You know, at least Edge and Christian made their getaway fairly quickly. You know,
they saw that. They saw the fire starting. They ran as fast as they could.
Yeah, absolutely.
Finn, where can people find you to either say hello, look at a picture of you, tell you how much they love you, or buy something of yours to keep you in the lap of luxury that you are?
Yes, you can visit me at the website, which is www.finleymartin.co.uk, or on Twitter at PowerSlamOnline or at Finley Martin. And where can people find you, Kenny?
You can find me on Twitter at KennyMC1985. Yes, it was a horrible decision to have my year of birth in my Twitter handle, and I'm working on trying to change it. And if that bloody Eggman who took Kenny McIntosh on Twitter and hasn't used it in 5 years would give it to me, the world would be a happier place. I hope to see some of you in London on Sunday. InsideTheRopes.co.uk for tickets. The Goldberg tour, there has been sensational feedback from everybody who's went, so I hope that we will see you there and finish the tour with a big show in London this Sunday. I was going to say finish the show with a bang, but I shouldn't really say that. Finish the tour with a big show in London. I hope to see you there, and we'll be back next week with more fun and frolics.
If I sad tonight.